What's going on, world? It's your boy Gemini Brown here, back with another episode of Nalo Kicking Knowledge. Today, we'll be doing Saturn in the 8th house, and basically talking about what happens when Saturn comes into the 8th house of your natal chart. And as we always do, what is Saturn? Saturn is the planet of restriction, limitations, reality, hard work, discipline, organization. What is the 8th house? The 8th house is it's like probably the most interesting house in the zodiac. It's the house of unexpected events, the house of shared resources, the house of desire. I like to look at it as the house of willpower. Also is known as the house of secrets, sex, weird stuff. So anything can happen in the 8th house, all right? But when Saturn comes here, first thing I would say, basically, because I'm a karmic guy, so I'm trying to see what real talents the planets give you in their signs and their houses. And what I've seen is that Saturn in the 8th house indicates a disciplined soul, someone who has come to great mastery over a certain facet of their desired nature. Or it can be the opposite. This is where we're going to pay attention to what sign and aspects is making, and really with the sign is going to be the overall grade for your Saturn and how well you express that. So just to elaborate on what I mean a little bit more and bring in another planet for an example, if you have a planet conjunct Saturn in the 8th house, it shows that you may have that great discipline, or you may be restricted to the things pertaining to that planet. So, the moon, right? The moon governs our emotions. It's how we nurture others and like to be nurtured in return. So one way this can go is that there is a complete lock on your emotions, and you may end up being with someone who isn't very emotional and plays the Saturn to your moon, okay? Or you can be the moon, you can be the Saturn to your moon. Basically, you won't open up, right? But on the other hand, as far as emotional stability, it can indicate someone who's able to deal with crises better than most would. Okay, so with this, using the same example of moon, it can indicate someone with a very sharp mind and a powerful mind. Okay, so one thing here with Saturn in the 8th house, you have the ability to tap into the power to manifest, okay, and the power to really make things happen, and that's through a variety of ways. So that's one thing. The next thing is that Saturn here, with this being that, so the 8th house is looked to reflect life after marriage, right? And how the resources are, because it's opposite the 2nd house of your personal resources. So now it's your resources with someone else. So depending on how the 7th house is set up, right, and where else Saturn is ruling, it can limit that. It can limit your coming together with somebody in a particular fashion of joint assets. So let's just say you do get married early, right? Within your marriage, that would be an issue. The ability to save together, okay, and do things together financially would be a problem. But as you get older, it'll become easier, okay? People with Saturn in the 8th do well with investments as they get older. Now, if you have a well-placed Saturn from the rip, being being an entrepreneur is something you may be very much a natural at, because you may just have a natural knack for networking and hitting it big with joint assets. Okay. Next thing it does here is that, like I said, if Saturn is not well placed, it can indicate someone who's their sexual willpower is weak. Okay, so under certain conditions, a prostitute can be seen from this position. But on the flip side, this is we have someone who the sexual force within themselves is potent, because they know how to moderate it. All right, someone with Saturn here, they may go through long periods of celibacy, and then when they get into a relationship, they release, because, like I said, the desire nature here is very much disciplined. Okay, so very, very potent, and if controlled correctly and depending on the aspects, can have a very magnetic pull towards the opposite sex. Next thing with Saturn here in the 8th house is that, when you look at, when you get all these books and you see what the houses represent, and you start to look around yourself in society, you see what Saturn in the 8th house means just by looking. And one thing for me, with the 8th house representing, like things underground, hidden things, right? When I see people working on the road, like highways and stuff with pipe systems, I'm like, yo, I want to see your chart. Like, how did you end up with this job? Like, your job, your knowledge of what you do is so much different than others. And this is where Saturn, being that disciplined and organized planet, comes in. So with Saturn in the 8th house, you can have a very mechanical job. Something like construction, masonry, welding, right? Say Saturn is in Gemini, you will be very skilled with your hands and a multitude of things. Okay? But yeah, like, so look at people in society and think, man, what planet is dominating your chart that you've been led here in this career direction? And what you'll see with construction workers and stuff like that, that's Saturn in the 8th, because Saturn wants to do certain type of jobs in certain positions, and in the 8th house, it wants a rugged position like that. But here's one of the huge lessons for Saturn in the 8th, all right? You have to learn how to handle the unexpected. Simple as that. Control one's desires and learn how to handle the unexpected. Saturn is all about routine. It wants to know, okay, this is that, this goes with that. I know what to expect here. But in the 8th house, it's going to test that. It's going to bring you to situations where you're forced to experience death. And through that death, you grow. Okay? And that's part of your transformation. Right? What else? Saturn in the 8th. Oh yeah, here's another one I wanted to add too. This is great for someone, with it being the house of secrets, someone who could be a detective or a spy. Someone who has to move in silence, or basically someone who will really keep a secret. All right? Someone who's privileged to, like I was saying before, like being a construction worker, you have a different type of knowledge. All right? So let's just say there was a person who had a good 5th house and a good 10th house, and they worked in politics, right? Or for the government. Saturn in the 8th house would go with a CIA agent. Somebody like that. All right? I think that's it. All right? So, guys, this is my interpretation of Saturn in the 8th house. Feel free to comment. Let me know if I left anything out, what you thought. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, feel free to do so. Until next time, peace.